Writing for specific musicians is really important to me. I love the collaborative aspect, and there's nothing more exciting for me than thinking about how a particular musician, or what I think is exciting about their playing, and then being able to really explore that. I did a project a couple of years ago in the US where it was a large ensemble work. Not a large ensemble, it was a large work with a smaller ensemble, 6 musicians, but within this large 45-minute work there were solo movements, and each of those were designed with the individual in mind. And that to me was really fun because we'd done a residency the year before. I got to know those musicians really well, and there was just so much of their personality that comes through performance, and I love being able to tap into that and say, well, this is my take on you and what you do well, and let's really explore that. I think it's like very obvious with singers because, you know, you all have individual voices. You can't buy the same model as someone else. But I think with performers, when I hear a performance that's clearly modelled off a recording of a previous performance, it really disappoints me because that's saying you have no sort of agency of your own to make creative decisions, or you've chosen not to for some reason, and that's no fun. Hearing the same work done by multiple ensembles is really fascinating to me as a composer, and I'm always interested in how someone new does it as opposed to my idea of what the piece is. And so my philosophy with collaboration is always to say yes to everything I can, unless I feel sort of violently opposed that it dramatically changes the intent of the work. But I think when you think about particularly a large piece, you know, you've got thousands of these decisions that go into the creative process, and some of them are ones that you've laboured over for far too long, and others are ones that are made very quickly because the doorbell's rung, or it's dinner time, or, you know, you're about to teach a class. And so I think that, you know, you could make hundreds of tiny changes and the intent of the work is still there. I think that allowing the performer into the composing process and to have a say is, firstly, it's an excellent resource for a composer, you know, to have all of these other brains looking at the music and people who are experts on their instruments. I'm not experts on the instruments. So if they can see what I'm trying to do and say, well, on my instrument, you can achieve that better by doing it this way, or it works more naturally, then I'm like, yes, let's do that, great. And so then I'm always really open to other interpretations. I think it tells the composer a lot about the work when you hear different people's approach to even just interpreting your notation. Something you think is explicitly clear, sometimes you hear it was not as clear or not read in the same way you'd intended. But also just from an artistic perspective, the performance of the last piece that you wrote informs future works. And so when you hear something different and, you know, that captures your attention in an interpretation, that then can feed into the next thing you write. And so it's like this development of your language as well. So I had a piece that I wrote that had an electric guitar solo in the middle of it. And I'd imagined it with the electric guitar, or with a particular electric guitar timbre, but I imagined it played sort of quite classically, I guess. And the guitarist who premiered the piece had both a contemporary, as in popular music background, as well as classical. And he really interpreted it more into that popular music background. And it was so distinctive and so individual, and it's not at all how I imagined the piece, but I loved it. And that led to a larger collaboration where I really explored that part of his performance. But it was interesting because a few years later I heard the piece performed by a different ensemble and very classically played. And I'd sort of forgotten that that was initially what I had imagined. And so hearing that with a different guitarist made me think, oh yeah, that is what I was thinking. And these two versions exist, and I think they're both effective. But yeah, fascinating as a composer to have those differences in interpretation. And I think it's a real disservice if a composer sort of stops the performer from having that influence. I mean, the idea of a work just having one performance and disappearing is terribly tragic. You know, different performers have different audiences and can take that to different people. And I think that's something that every composer would want.